I'm Clara Moreno, an artist, a single mother, a woman who was abandoned by her husband just as the greatest hope of my life faded away. I used to believe that losing the ability to have children meant losing my worth. But then, I got pregnant after I left, gave birth alone, and what happened next was beyond anything I could have imagined. The father came back, not with an apology, but with a lawyer and a DNA test.
Before I share this full story, one filled with heartbreak, hope, and a touch of miracle, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit the like button and subscribe if you've ever made it through something similar.
The afternoon I met Ethan Calloway. Portland's March rain hammered the windows of Powell's books like it had something personal against the glass. I'd ducked inside, soaking wet, clutching a paper bag of art supplies that was disintegrating in my hands. That's when I collided with him. Literally crashed into his chest as he rounded the poetry section. My brushes scattered across the floor like pickup sticks, and a tube of cadmium yellow burst open, spattering his Italian leather shoes. "I'm so sorry," I gasped, dropping to my knees to gather the mess. My hands were shaking, not from cold, but from that particular brand of embarrassment that makes you want to evaporate. "Don't be." His voice was warm, amused even. He knelt beside me, careful not to let his pressed khakis touch the wet floor. "I've always thought these shoes needed more color." When I looked up, I found myself staring into storm gray eyes that crinkled at the corners. Ethan Calloway looked like he'd stepped out of an architecture magazine. All clean lines and calculated angles except for his smile. That smile was pure chaos, lopsided and real. "Clara Moreno," I said, offering my paint-stained hand. "Ethan." He took it without hesitation, yellow paint and all. "Let me buy you coffee, or new brushes, or both." That's how it started, with spilled paint and an offer I couldn't refuse. Over coffee at the cafe upstairs, I learned he designed buildings that scraped the sky while I taught children to see the world in watercolors. He came from old Portland money. I came from a one-bedroom apartment in East LA where my mother had raised my brother Miguel and me on seamstress wages and stubborn hope. "You're not like anyone I know," he said after our third cup, and the way he said it, like I was a revelation instead of a complication, made something flutter beneath my ribs. 8 months later, we stood in the courthouse, my second-hand dress still smelling faintly of lavender sachets from the vintage shop. Miguel was my only witness, signing to me that I looked beautiful even as tears tracked down his face. Ethan's family had declined to attend. His mother, Margaret, had made her position clear. "She's lovely, dear, but think of your future. Think of your children." But Ethan had chosen me anyway, sliding a simple gold band onto my finger and whispering, "You are my future." Our first home together was a wooden house on the hills overlooking the city, all windows and weathered cedar. Ethan had bought it as a fixer-upper, a canvas for our life together. The first thing he did was transform the small room at the end of the hall. "What's this for?" I asked, watching him measure and sketch. "The future," he said, pulling me against him. "Our future." I understood then. This would be the nursery, the room that would wait for our children. I painted the walls myself, a mural of trees whose branches reached toward clouds shaped like dreams. Each leaf was a wish, each bird a hope taking flight. For 3 years, that room waited, and waited, and waited. The first year, we laughed about it. "More time to practice," Ethan would say, waggling his eyebrows in that way that made me forget everything except the warmth of his hands. The second year, the laughter grew thinner. I started tracking everything. Temperatures, cycles, the phases of the moon. My nightstand became a pharmacy of supplements and fertility teas that tasted like disappointment. The third year, Ethan stopped looking at the nursery when he walked past. It was after Sunday dinner at the Calloway estate that everything began to crack. Margaret had outdone herself. Crown roast, 3 kinds of potatoes, enough crystal on the table to stock a museum. I pushed food around my plate while Ethan's sister Judith went on about her third pregnancy. "The key is not to stress," she said, patting her swollen belly. "Stress is toxic to conception. Right, Mother?" Margaret's eyes found mine across the table. "Indeed, though sometimes nature simply knows best. Some gardens are meant to bloom, others—" She let the sentence trail off, but her meaning hung in the air like smoke. In the car afterward, Ethan was silent. His hands gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles went white. "She didn't mean," he started. "She did," I stared out at the rain-slicked streets. She meant every word. That night, I couldn't sleep. I wandered into the nursery and stood before my mural. The trees I'd painted seemed to droop now, their branches heavy with the weight of waiting. I picked up a brush and began to paint over one section, not destroying it, but layering it with new images. A tree losing its leaves, one by one, while its roots dug deeper into dark soil. I called it the waiting tree. Ethan found me there at dawn, surrounded by tubes of paint and dirty water jars. "Clara, what are you doing?" "Telling the truth," I said, adding another bare branch. "This room isn't waiting for a baby anymore. It's waiting for us to admit what we both know." He pulled the brush from my hand. "Don't say that. The doctor said unexplained. Do you know what that means? It means I'm broken in ways they can't even name." "You're not broken." But he said it to the wall, not to me. The distance grew like black mold in the corners of our beautiful house. Ethan threw himself into work, designing taller buildings while I became smaller. Margaret's helpful suggestions arrived weekly. Business cards for fertility specialists, articles about acupuncture, a book about the power of positive thinking with key passages highlighted in yellow. Then came the envelope with no return address. Inside, a photo of a baby announcement. Sophie Dane, MD, welcomes the miracle of modern medicine. IVF success on the first try. Sophie, Ethan's ex, the one Margaret had always preferred, who was everything I wasn't. Blonde, bred for charity galas, womb apparently made of gold. I was washing dishes when I heard them talking. Ethan and his mother, voices carrying from his study. I hadn't meant to eavesdrop, but Margaret's voice has a way of cutting through walls. "Sophie's offered to help," she was saying. "She understands the situation." "Mother, stop. She has proven fertility, Ethan. And with your genetic material," I said, "Stop. I'm thinking of your future. That girl can't give you children. Sophie can. It's simple math." The plate in my hands shattered against the sink. I stood there watching my blood mix with the dishwater, feeling nothing at all. When Ethan found me bandaging my hand, his face was pale. "How much did you hear?" "Enough." "Clara, I would never, but you've thought about it." I watched his face, saw the truth flicker there. "You've already talked to her, haven't you?" His silence was answer enough. That night, I packed a single suitcase. Just clothes, my brushes, and a tiny yellow onesie I'd bought 2 years ago during a particularly hopeful week. Ethan sat on our bed, head in his hands. "Where will you go?" "Does it matter?" "Of course it matters. You're my wife." "No," I said, zipping the suitcase closed. "I'm your disappointment." Miguel met me at the Albuquerque airport with a sign that read "World's Best Sister" in careful handwriting. Seeing him there, tall and gentle, his signing hands already asking if I was okay, broke something loose in me. I sobbed into his chest while travelers streamed around us, and he just held on, steady as a lighthouse. His apartment in Santa Fe was small but bright, filled with his woodworking projects and the smell of sawdust. He'd cleared out his studio for me, laying out new canvases and organizing my salvaged brushes by size. "Stay as long as you need," he signed, then added, "Forever is also fine." For 3 months, I painted. Not pretty things, raw, angry splashes of color that looked like wounds. I taught art classes at the community center to pay my share of rent, ignored Ethan's calls, and tried to pretend my body wasn't doing strange things. When I fainted in the middle of demonstrating watercolor techniques to a group of seniors, Miguel insisted on the hospital. The doctor, a young woman with kind eyes, ran tests while I stared at the ceiling tiles. "Mrs. Moreno," she said, returning with a strange expression. "When was your last period?" I laughed, bitter and short. "I gave up tracking those disappointments months ago." "Well," she said gently, "you're approximately 10 weeks pregnant." The room tilted. I grabbed the exam table's edges, certain I'd misheard. "That's impossible. We tried for 3 years. The doctor said." "Sometimes," she smiled, "when we stop trying so hard, our bodies remember what they're meant to do. Stress is a powerful fertility blocker." 10 weeks. I counted backward, realized this tiny life had been growing inside me even as my marriage fell apart. As Ethan discussed surrogate options with his ex, as I painted my rage onto canvas after canvas. Miguel drove me home in silence, but his hands were talking. Quick, excited movements I caught from the corner of my eye. When we reached the apartment, he pulled me to his workshop. For the baby, he signed, unveiling a rocking chair he'd been carving. The wood was smooth as silk, with tiny stars etched into the armrests. How did you know? I signed back. You've been glowing, he replied. Also, you ate an entire jar of pickles yesterday. That night, I sat in front of my phone for hours. Ethan deserved to know. Any decent person would call, would share this miracle we'd created together. But every time I reached for the phone, I saw Margaret's face. Heard her talking about proven fertility and genetic material like I was a failed science experiment. I thought about Sophie Dane with her medical degree and successful IVF. Thought about Ethan considering his options while I was still in the house. Thought about that empty nursery with its waiting trees. I turned off the phone. The pregnancy was difficult, but beautiful. I painted through morning sickness, taught classes with swollen feet, and felt this tiny person dancing inside me like she was already ready to take on the world. Miguel went to every appointment, learned to sign niece and love and protect forever. I painted new murals, not of waiting trees, but of blooming gardens, root systems that connected beneath the earth, branches that bore fruit. My art began selling at local galleries, tourists drawn to what one critic called the fierce hope embedded in every brushstroke. When labor came, it was Miguel who held my hand, who counted breaths with me, who cried when Lyanna emerged screaming and perfect and absolutely livid about the bright lights. She has opinions, the nurse laughed, placing her on my chest. I looked down at my daughter, dark hair like mine, but those storm gray eyes that would forever remind me of her father, and felt my heart restructure itself around her tiny fist. Hello, little love, I whispered. I've been waiting for you. Miguel took 1,000 photos, signed beautiful over and over until Lyanna settled against me, suddenly peaceful. In that moment, I forgot about Ethan, about Margaret, about every barren month and bitter word. There was only this, my daughter's breath against my skin, my brother's joy filling the room, and the strange, fierce completeness of my newly shaped family. 5 years is long enough to build a life that feels solid. Long enough for a colicky baby to become a little girl who paints with her whole body, who signs as fluently as she speaks, who asks endless questions about everything except the one thing I dread answering. Our days had rhythm. Morning painting sessions while Lyanna played with blocks. Afternoon classes at my studio. Casa Lyanna, a converted garage that smelled like oils and possibility. Evenings with Miguel, teaching Lyanna to work with wood scraps while I made dinner. Mama, she said one day, arranging paintbrushes by size like I'd taught her. Why doesn't Uncle Miguel talk with his mouth? He talks with his hands, I explained. Some people's voices come from their throats. Uncle Miguel's voice comes from his heart through his hands. She considered this, then signed, I love you to him across the room. His face lit up like Christmas morning. We were happy. Not the desperate, grasping happiness I'd sought in those trying years, but something quieter, sustainable. I'd learned to find joy in small things. Lyanna's laugh, Miguel's terrible dad jokes in ASL, the way morning light hit the mountains like a blessing. Then the letter came. City of Santa Fe, requesting proposals for a new community arts center. I almost threw it away. What did I know about architectural proposals? But something made me open it, read the details. Lead architect, Ethan Callaway, Callaway and Associates. My hands shook as I set down the letter. 5 years of silence and now this. I could withdraw Casa Lyanna from consideration, hide like I'd been hiding. But I looked around my studio, at the children's artwork covering every wall, at the seniors' paintings drying on racks, at all we'd built here, and felt something harder than fear. We're not running, I told Lyanna, who was painting a rainbow with more enthusiasm than accuracy. Running where, Mama? Nowhere, baby. We're staying right here. The meeting was scheduled for a Tuesday. I dressed carefully, professional but not trying too hard. Lyanna wanted to wear her tutu over her jeans, and I let her. If Ethan was going to see us, he'd see us as we really were. Miguel offered to come, but I shook my head. This was something I needed to face alone. Well, not alone. Never alone anymore. Be brave, Mama, Lyanna said, straightening my necklace with paint-stained fingers. Always, baby. The conference room smelled like coffee and ambition. I was early, setting up my portfolio when the door opened. I knew without turning around. 5 years, and I still recognized the sound of his breathing. Clara, I made myself turn slowly, professionally. Mr. Calloway. He looked older. Successful, polished, but older. There were lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before, a tightness to his jaw. His gaze swept over me, cataloging changes, then froze. Because that's when Lyanna walked in from the bathroom, signing "all done," and stopping dead when she saw a stranger in the room. I watched Ethan's face cycle through confusion, recognition, and something that looked like grief. Lyanna pressed against my leg, suddenly shy. "Baby, this is Mr. Calloway," I said carefully. "He's here about the arts center." But Ethan wasn't looking at me. He was staring at Lyanna like she was a ghost, a miracle, a mathematical equation he couldn't solve. I saw the moment he noticed her eyes, his eyes, and the way his whole body seemed to fold in on itself. "How old?" His voice was barely a whisper. 5, Lyanna answered for herself, then added proudly, 5 3/4. The presentation was a disaster. I stumbled through my slides while Ethan sat frozen, his assistant taking notes he wasn't dictating. Lyanna colored quietly, occasionally glancing at the strange man who kept staring at her. Afterward, in the parking lot, he caught my arm. "We need to talk." "We needed to talk 5 years ago," I said, guiding Lyanna to our car. "You made your choice." "What choice? You disappeared. You took my—" He stopped, glanced at Lyanna. "Careful," I warned. "Think very carefully about what you say next." His hands were shaking. The man who designed skyscrapers without breaking a sweat was shaking over a 5-year-old in a tutu. "Is she mine?" "She's mine," I said firmly. "Has been since the moment I found out she existed. Since I chose her over everything else." "Clara, please, I have a right." "You have nothing." The words came out harder than I intended. "Rights are earned. Where were you when she was born? When she had colic for 3 months straight? When she took her first steps?" "I didn't know." "Because you were too busy exploring other options." The DNA test was Ethan's lawyer's idea. I agreed because refusing would have led to court orders and ugliness I didn't want near Lyanna. The cheek swab took seconds. The wait for results felt like years. During that time, Ethan tried. He sent flowers, birds of paradise that reminded me of our first apartment. He had his assistant call about scheduling meetings. He even showed up at Casa Lyanna during my senior watercolor class, standing in the doorway like a lost tourist. "That's the man from the meeting," Mrs. Chen whispered, squinting over her painting of peonies. "Handsome." "Irrelevant," I muttered, demonstrating color mixing with unnecessary force. The results came on a Thursday. Probability of paternity, 99.97%. I stared at the paper. This scientific confirmation of what I'd always known. Lyanna was drawing at the kitchen table, tongue poking out in concentration. "Mama, can I have a pet?" "We'll see, baby." "That means no," she sighed, returning to her art. Miguel signed from across the room. "What will you do?" I didn't know. For 5 years, I'd built walls around our life, brick by brick. Now Ethan had a piece of paper that gave him a battering ram. The next morning, Margaret Calloway arrived at my studio. She looked older too, but her spine was still steel, her pearls still perfect. "Mrs. Moreno." She said it like she was identifying a species of insect. "Mrs. Calloway." She glanced around my studio, at the children's art, the half-finished canvases, the controlled chaos of creation, and her nose wrinkled slightly. "I'm here to make you an offer," she said. "A generous one, for the child." I actually laughed. "You want to buy my daughter?" "Don't be crude. I'm offering financial security. The best schools, opportunities you couldn't possibly provide. All we ask is shared custody. Summers with us, the school year with you. Perfectly reasonable." "No." "I'm sorry?" "No. N-O. The same answer I should have given when you suggested my husband consider a surrogate." Her face went white, then red. "How dare you? How dare I? How dare you come into my space and try to purchase my child like she's a commodity? That child is a Calloway. That child is Lyanna Moreno, and she's perfect exactly as she is. She doesn't need your money or your schools or your suffocating expectations." Margaret pulled out her phone. "I'm calling my lawyer." "Good," I said, pulling out my own phone. "Because I'm calling the reporter who's been begging for an interview about the single mothers in the arts community. I'm sure she'd love to hear how the Calloway family handles grandparent rights." We stared at each other, 2 women separated by more than money. Finally, Margaret straightened her pearls. "You always were stronger than you looked," she said quietly. "I had to be." She left without another word, but I knew this wasn't over. People like Margaret Calloway didn't give up. They just changed tactics. That evening, Ethan appeared at our door. Miguel answered, ready to slam it shut, but I put a hand on his arm. 5 minutes, I said. Clara, I'm sorry. About my mother, about everything. I didn't know she was coming. But you knew she would. I kept my body blocking the doorway. You've always known what she was capable of. I've changed, he said quietly. 5 years. I've had therapy. I've worked on myself. I just want to know her, to be part of her life. She doesn't even know you exist, I said. Not as her father. What am I supposed to tell her? That Daddy needed some time to explore his options? His face crumpled. I made a mistake. The biggest mistake of my life. But please, don't punish her for my failures. From inside, I heard Lyanna singing, some made-up song about butterflies and paint. My heart twisted. I need time, I said finally. And if I let you meet her properly, it's on my terms. No lawyers, no custody battles, no Margaret. Anything, he said quickly. Whatever you need. I need you to earn it, I said. Not demand it. Earn it. I closed the door on his hopeful face and leaned against it, suddenly exhausted. Miguel was watching me with worried eyes. You don't have to do this, he signed. Yes, I signed back. I do. For her. Because that's what love meant. Doing the hard things, the scary things, the things that required you to be bigger than your hurt. We started small. Coffee at a neutral location while Lyanna was at school. Ethan looked nervous, fidgeting with his cup like a teenager. Tell me about her, he said. Everything. So I did. How she was born during a snowstorm. Her first word, more. The way she mixed English and sign language when she was excited. Her obsession with dragons and dislike of socks. She sounds amazing, he said softly. She is. Like her mother. I looked away. Don't. I mean it. Clara, what you've done, raising her alone. I wasn't alone. I had Miguel. Still, you're incredible. I'm tired, I corrected. Do you know what it's like being the only parent, being sick and still having to make dinner? Having no one to share the worry when she has a fever? I'm sorry, he said. I'm so fucking sorry. It was the profanity that convinced me. Ethan Calloway, who never cursed, who thought strong language was for people with weak vocabularies. Sorry doesn't change the past 5 years, I said. No, but maybe it can shape the next 5. I introduced him as Mama's friend Ethan. Lyanna was polite but unimpressed, more interested in the crayons the restaurant provided than the stranger across from her. Do you like to draw? Ethan asked. Everyone likes to draw, she informed him. Some people just forget. He smiled, that real crooked smile I remembered. What do you like to draw? Dragons, and Uncle Miguel, and paint tubes that look like rockets. Could you draw me something? She studied him critically. Maybe, if you're good. Slowly, carefully, we built something new. Not a romance, that ship had sailed and sunk, but a tentative cooperation. Ethan came to Saturday art classes, learning to finger paint with the toddlers. He brought Lyanna architecture books, showing her how buildings were like 3-dimensional drawings. This one looks like it's dancing, she said, pointing to one of his designs. That's exactly what I wanted, he said, delighted. How did you know? Because it's happy. Buildings should be happy. Miguel remained skeptical, watching Ethan like a hawk during visits. But even he had to admit Ethan was trying. No lawyers, no demands, just consistent presence and endless patience. He reads to her in sign language, Miguel told me one evening. He asked me to teach him. I know. His signing is terrible. I know. But he's trying. I know. 3 months in, Lyanna asked the question I'd been dreading. Mama, is Ethan my daddy? We were painting, side by side at our easels, working on a mural for her bedroom. I set down my brush. What makes you ask that, baby? Rosie at school says I look like him, and he looks at me like Uncle Miguel looks at his favorite wood, like I'm special. I took a deep breath. Yes, baby, Ethan is your daddy. She continued painting, adding purple to her dragon's wings. Why didn't he live with us? Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, I said carefully. We both needed time to figure things out. Did you figure it out? We're still working on it. She nodded, apparently satisfied. Can he come to my birthday? If you want him to. I want a dragon cake, she said, moving on with the fluid adaptability of childhood, with purple wings. The birthday party was a success. Ethan arrived with a handmade wooden dragon that Miguel had obviously helped him create, and Lyanna shrieked with joy. Watching them together, her showing him her painting technique, him listening with absolute focus, something in my chest unclenched. "Thank you," he said later, as we cleaned up purple frosting and glitter, "for letting me be here." "Thank you for showing up," I said, "for keeping your word." That night, I found Lyanna arranging her presents, the wooden dragon in the center. "Mama," she said thoughtfully, "I think I'm lucky." "Why's that, baby?" "I have you and Uncle Miguel and now Daddy too. That's a lot of people who love me." "That is a lot," I agreed, kissing her head. "Ms. Rodriguez at school says some families look different but love the same. Ms. Rodriguez is very smart." "I'm going to paint our family," she decided. "But I need more colors. We're very colorful." Yes, I thought. We certainly were. The Arts Center project moved forward, with Casa Lyanna as a cornerstone program. Ethan and I learned to work together professionally, our meetings less charged with history and more focused on future. "I want a children's wing," I said, spreading out my sketches. "Not just classrooms, creative spaces where mess is welcome." "Like your studio," he said, smiling. "Controlled chaos." Exactly. He made notes, suggested modifications that improved my ideas without changing their heart. We were good at this, I realized. We'd always been good at building things together. Margaret made one more attempt, arriving at the Arts Center groundbreaking with photographers and society reporters in tow. She made a beeline for Lyanna, who was helping me arrange paintbrushes for the ceremony. "You must be my granddaughter," she said loudly, ensuring the photographers heard. Lyanna looked at her coolly. "I don't know you. I'm your daddy's mother." "Oh." Lyanna considered this. "Do you paint?" No. "Do you sign?" "Sign?" "Never mind," Lyanna said, returning to her brushes. "Nice to meet you." Margaret looked bewildered. She'd expected, what, a Callaway princess desperate for grandmother's approval? Instead, she got Lyanna Moreno, who measured people's worth in creativity and kindness. Ethan appeared at my elbow. "I'll handle this," he said quietly. I watched him steer Margaret away, their conversation too low to hear, but his gestures firm. When he returned, he looked tired but resolved. "She won't bother you again," he said. "And you? Will she bother you?" "Probably, but my priorities are clear now." The opening of the Arts Center was everything I'd dreamed. Children's laughter echoing off walls designed to inspire, sunlight streaming through windows placed just so. Lyanna ran from room to room, declaring each one perfect for different kinds of art. "This one's for messy art," she announced, "and this one's for quiet art." "What's quiet art?" Ethan asked. "When you draw your feelings instead of saying them," she explained, "like Uncle Miguel does." During the reception, I noticed a man standing near my paintings, tall, with professor glasses and an appreciative smile. He approached as I was straightening a frame. "Clara Moreno? I'm David Chen from Painted Light Publishing. We specialize in art books, particularly narrative collections. Your work, it tells such powerful stories." "Thank you," I said, suddenly aware of paint under my fingernails. "I'd love to discuss publishing a collection, the Waiting Tree series especially. There's something universal in the particular pain and hope you've captured." I glanced across the room where Ethan was helping Lyanna demonstrate proper brush cleaning technique to a group of kids. "It's a complicated story," I said. "The best ones always are," David replied, handing me his card. "Think about it. These paintings deserve a wider audience." Later, as the crowds thinned, Ethan found me on the roof garden, a space he'd designed after I mentioned how I used to paint on Miguel's apartment roof. "Big day," he said, joining me at the railing. "The biggest." "Clara, I need to say something." He turned to face me. "I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect us to be what we were, but I need you to know. Losing you was the worst thing that ever happened to me. And finding Lyanna, it's like being given a second chance I don't deserve." "You're a good father," I said quietly. "You've become one." "I'm trying. That's all any of us can do." We stood in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over Santa Fe. Somewhere below, I could hear Lyanna laughing with Miguel. "The publisher," Ethan said eventually. "David Chen. He seemed interested." "You were eavesdropping?" I was paying attention. "There's a difference." "Is there?" "Clara." He said my name like it was a complete sentence. "You should do it. Your story, our story. It matters. Even the ugly parts? Especially those. How else do people learn? I fingered David's card in my pocket. A book. My paintings and their stories, out in the world. The thought terrified and thrilled me in equal measure. I'll think about it, I said. Good. Ethan pushed off the railing. I should go. Early meeting tomorrow. Ethan? I called as he reached the door. Thank you for respecting my boundaries, for proving me wrong about some things. Not everything? No, I said honestly. Not everything. He nodded, understanding. Good night, Clara. Good night. 6 months later, I stood in a gallery in Portland, full circle, watching people move through my paintings. The Waiting Tree, a journey through loss and hope, had become more than a book. It was an exhibition, a conversation, a mirror for others walking similar paths. Lyanna wore her best dress, over jeans naturally, and played gallery assistant, telling anyone who'd listen about each painting's story. Miguel shadowed her, beaming with pride. Even Ethan was there, keeping a respectful distance but clearly moved by seeing our history displayed on white walls. The progression is remarkable, a critic was saying to David. From the early pieces, all that desperate hope, to the later works where hope transforms into something fiercer. I thought about those early paintings, created in our Hill House when I still believed a baby would fix everything. Now I knew better. Children didn't fix broken things. They showed you what was worth rebuilding. Mama! Lyanna appeared at my side. The lady with the notebook wants to talk to you. The lady with the notebook turned out to be a features writer from the Portland Tribune. Her questions were thoughtful, probing without prying. The title painting, The Waiting Tree. It appears 3 times in the collection, each time transformed. Can you talk about that evolution? I looked at the paintings she meant. The first, bare branches against a dark sky. The second, the same tree with one small bud. The third, full bloom, but different than expected. Not the traditional leaves, but a riot of unlikely colors, as if the tree had learned to grow something entirely new. Sometimes what we're waiting for isn't what we need, I said. Sometimes the thing that grows is better than what we planned. And the empty nursery became full, I said simply. Just not in the way we expected. The interview continued, but my mind wandered to that room. Ethan's carefully designed nursery that had waited so long. Last month, Lyanna had asked to see the house where Mommy and Daddy used to live. Ethan still owned it, though he lived downtown now. Walking through those rooms was like visiting a museum of my former self. Everything smaller than memory, everything dimmed by time. But when we reached the nursery, Lyanna gasped. Mama, you painted this! The mural was still there, faded but intact. The waiting trees, the hopeful clouds. Lyanna traced the brush strokes with reverent fingers. It's sad, she said finally. Why do you think that? Because the trees are alone. Trees should have friends. Without asking permission, she'd pulled out her travel watercolor set and added to the mural. Birds, butterflies, a sun with a smiling face. Quick, confident strokes that brought life to my old grief. Is that okay? She'd asked belatedly. Ethan and I had exchanged looks over her head. It's perfect, he said. Now, standing in the Portland gallery, I realized that was what healing looked like. Not erasing the past, but adding to it, layer by layer, until the pain became part of a larger, more beautiful picture. Miss Moreno? The reporter was waiting. You were saying about the empty nursery? I was saying it's not empty anymore. My daughter fills every space she enters. She just does it from a different home than the one we originally planned. And her father? I glanced at Ethan, who was showing Lyanna how the gallery lights worked. He's learning that love isn't about possession. It's about presence. Later, as the opening wound down, David found me hiding in the coat room, overwhelmed by all the attention. Second thoughts? He asked. Third and fourth thoughts, I admitted. It's strange seeing your pain hung up for strangers to analyze. But necessary, he said gently. Do you know how many emails we've gotten? Women who thought they were alone in this, who needed to see someone else survive it. He was right. The messages had been pouring in. Stories of loss, of waiting, of dreams deferred and different joys discovered. Each one a reminder that my story wasn't just mine. There's interest in a second book, David said carefully. About building the life you didn't plan. I'm still building it, I said. Exactly. The gallery was nearly empty when I finally emerged. Lyanna was asleep in Miguel's arms, paint somehow in her hair despite the formal occasion. Ethan was waiting by the door. "Can I drive you to the hotel?" he offered. "We have a rental car." "I know, He shrugged. "Old habits." "Ethan," I said gently, "we're not those people anymore." "I know that too, but maybe—" He stopped, started again. "Maybe the people we've become could be friends. Real friends. For her." I looked at our daughter, sleeping so peacefully in her uncle's arms. She'd grown up with an unconventional family, but she'd never lacked for love. Maybe that was enough. Maybe that was everything. "Friends," I agreed. "For her, and for us." He smiled, not the calculated smile of our early days or the desperate one of our ending, but something new, something that belonged to now. "I'll see you next month?" he asked. "For her art show at school? Wouldn't miss it. She wants to paint a mural in the cafeteria, something about dragons making sandwiches." "Of course she does." As we parted ways in the Portland night, I thought about circles, how we'd come back to where we started, but as entirely different people. The girl who'd crashed into Ethan Callaway and Powell's books wouldn't recognize the woman I'd become. That girl had been waiting for someone else to complete her story. This woman, this mother, artist, survivor, knew better. Stories weren't completed by other people. They were written day by day, choice by choice, brushstroke by brushstroke. Back at the hotel, I tucked Lyanna into bed and sat by the window, watching the city lights. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "Clara, this is Sophie Dane. I saw the exhibition notice in the paper. I wanted to say, I'm sorry, for my part in everything, your paintings. They're extraordinary, as is your grace." I stared at the message for a long time before typing back, "Thank you, wishing you well." Because what else was there to say? We'd all been younger then, all been sure we knew how life was supposed to unfold. "Mama?" Lyanna's sleepy voice called. "Are you sad?" "No, baby, just thinking." "About the paintings?" "About roads," I said, crawling into bed beside her. "How sometimes the long way around takes you exactly where you need to be." "That's silly," she murmured, already drifting back to sleep. "Roads don't know where you're going." "You're right," I whispered, smoothing her hair. "We decide that part ourselves." In the morning, we'd drive back to Santa Fe. Back to our adobe house with its sunny studio, to Miguel's terrible cooking and gentle presence, to the arts center where children learned that mistakes were just unexpected colors. The room that had waited so long was no longer empty. It was filled with something better than dreams. It was filled with life as it actually was. Messy, complicated, beautiful life. And that, I finally understood, was enough. More than enough. It was everything.
Life doesn't always go according to plan, but that doesn't mean you've failed. Sometimes, what we build from the broken pieces turns out stronger and more beautiful than anything we ever dreamed of. If you've ever faced a heartbreaking choice, remember this. You have the right to rewrite your own story.